There is a grief that has no funeral. No one died, nothing was buried, and yet you carry it. A quiet, persistent mourning for something you can't quite name. It surfaces at odd moments. Watching someone live a life you once imagined for yourself. Passing a version of the future you thought you'd have. Lying awake and feeling the weight of all the paths you didn't take. The person you didn't become. The life that was possible and somehow never happened. You are grieving, but not for anyone who was lost. You are grieving for a life you never got to live. A self that existed only as potential, and that quietly slipped away while you were busy living the life you actually have. This grief is strange because it has no obvious object. The people around you might not understand it. You might not fully understand it yourself. Your life, by most measures, may be perfectly good. And still, underneath it, there is this ache, the sense of having missed something essential, of having left some crucial part of yourself unlived, of mourning a person you were supposed to become and never did. It can feel self-indulgent, or ungrateful, or simply confusing. Why grieve a life that never even existed? Carl Jung understood this grief better than almost anyone, because he understood that the lives we don't live do not simply vanish. The potential selves we abandon, the paths we foreclose, the parts of us we never develop, these do not disappear into nothing. They go somewhere. They live on inside us, unlived and unfulfilled, and they exert a real psychological force. Jung called it simply the unlived life, and he believed that coming to terms with it, grieving it honestly and understanding what it is trying to tell you, is one of the most important tasks of a human life, especially in its second half. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who founded analytical psychology, spent his career exploring the parts of the human psyche that operate beneath conscious awareness. And among his most profound insights was his understanding of potential, of the vast range of possible selves and possible lives contained within each person, only a fraction of which ever get realized. Every human being, Jung understood, is born with far more possibility than a single life can contain. And the process of living is, in part, a process of choosing, of actualizing some potentials and necessarily abandoning others. This abandonment is unavoidable. To live one life is to not live all the others. To choose one path is to leave countless others untaken. To become one kind of person is to forego becoming the many other kinds you might have been. Every choice is also a loss, a closing of doors, a small death of a possible self. And most of the time, we don't notice these losses as they happen because they are woven into the very fabric of living. Each decision quietly forecloses the alternatives, and we move forward without mourning what we've left behind. But Jung understood that these unlived possibilities do not simply cease to exist. They remain in the psyche as potential that was never realized, and they accumulate over a lifetime into what he called the unlived life, the sum of everything you might have been and did not become. And this unlived life is not psychologically inert. It carries energy. It presses on us, sometimes as a vague longing, sometimes as regret, sometimes as the specific grief this video is about, the mourning for the person we never got to be. Jung placed particular emphasis on how the unlived life connects to what he called the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we have not developed, disowned, or pushed out of consciousness. Much of what goes unlived is not lived precisely because it did not fit the persona we constructed, the acceptable self we presented to the world. The bold path not taken because it was too risky. The creative life abandoned because it was impractical. The version of ourselves that was too much, too strange, too far from what was expected. These unlived possibilities settle into the shadow, and from there they call to us, especially as we grow older and begin to sense the narrowing of our remaining time. Jung believed the unlived life had such power that it could affect not only the individual but those around them. He observed strikingly that nothing has a stronger psychological influence on children than the unlived lives of their parents, that the dreams a parent abandoned, the potential they left unrealized, could press down on the next generation as an unconscious burden. The unlived life, in other words, is not a private abstraction. It is a real force, with real consequences, moving beneath the surface of a life and shaping it in ways we rarely recognize. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. To understand why you might be grieving a life you never lived, it helps to understand one of the specific ways people fail to live their actual lives. A pattern Jung, and those who followed his thought, described as the provisional life. It is one of the most common and most quietly tragic conditions of human existence, and you may recognize it immediately. The provisional life is the life lived as if it were not the real thing, as if the real life were still to come, waiting somewhere in the future, and the present were merely a temporary arrangement, a waiting room, a rehearsal for the life that will truly begin later. The person living provisionally is always about to start living. They will pursue what they really want once conditions are right. They will become who they really are once the circumstances allow. They will take the risk, make the change, live the life they actually want. Later. Not now. Now is provisional. Now doesn't fully count. The real life is always just ahead, and they are always waiting to begin it. This waiting can consume an entire existence. The person defers and defers, always believing there is time, always assuming the real life will start eventually, always treating the present as a placeholder. And then, one day, they look up and discover that the provisional life was the only life they had, that while they were waiting to begin, the years passed, the possibilities narrowed, and the life they kept postponing quietly became the life they lived. The real life they were saving themselves for never arrived, because it was never going to arrive on its own. It was always here. In the present, they kept refusing to fully inhabit, waiting for them to claim it. Jung understood the psychological appeal of the provisional life. It protects a person from the risk and the responsibility of full commitment. As long as the real life hasn't started yet, you never have to fully commit to anything, never have to risk failing at what truly matters, never have to face the possibility that even your best effort might not produce the life you dreamed of. The provisional life keeps all the possibilities open by never actually pursuing any of them. It preserves the fantasy of the unlived life precisely by never testing it against reality. And this feels safer than the alternative, which is to commit fully to an actual life, with all its limitations, and to grieve the other lives you're thereby giving up. But the cost of this safety is enormous. The person who lives provisionally accumulates a vast unlived life, an ever-growing collection of deferred dreams and postponed selves. And eventually, often in the second half of life, the bill comes due. The grief arrives, the mourning for everything that was possible and never pursued, everything that was deferred until it was too late, the whole vast unlived life that was sacrificed to the illusion that there would always be more time. This is one of the deepest sources of the grief you may be feeling. Not that life treated you cruelly, but that you kept waiting to begin, and the waiting itself became the life. The grief for the unlived life has a particular relationship to time, and Jung understood this with special clarity. It tends to surface most powerfully in the second half of life, in midlife and beyond, and there is a profound reason for this that transforms how we should understand it. In the first half of life, Jung observed, our psychological task is largely outward. We build. We establish ourselves in the world, form our identity, pursue our ambitions, create our place among others. The energy of youth is directed toward becoming someone, achieving things, constructing a life. And in this phase, the unlived possibilities don't press on us so heavily, because there still seems to be time for everything. The future stretches out ahead, apparently limitless, and the paths not yet taken still feel available. But somewhere around the midpoint of life, something shifts. We begin to sense, not just intellectually but viscerally, that time is finite, that we will not, after all, get to live every life, become every self, pursue every possibility. The future that once seemed limitless reveals its edges, and in this recognition, the unlived life makes itself felt with new force. The paths not taken are no longer merely deferred. They begin to close permanently. The selves we didn't become are no longer waiting to be developed. They begin to slip beyond reach. And the grief arrives, the mourning for a life we now realize we will never get to live. Jung saw this midlife confrontation with the unlived life not as a crisis to be avoided, but as an essential and potentially transformative passage. The grief, painful as it is, carries a crucial message. It is telling you something about what you have neglected, what you have left unlived, what parts of yourself are still calling out to be realized. The specific shape of your grief is a map. The particular lives you mourn most, the unlived possibilities that ache the most sharply, are pointing directly at the parts of yourself that most need attention in the time you have left. This is the reframe that changes everything. The grief for the unlived life is not merely backward-looking, not merely a mourning for what is irrevocably gone. It is also forward-looking. It is information about what still matters to you, what your deepest self still longs for, what remains unrealized and might yet, in some form, be lived. The person you never became is not only a loss to be mourned. They are also a guide, pointing toward the parts of your potential that are still, even now, seeking expression. And the grief, fully felt and rightly understood, becomes the doorway to living the remainder of your life more fully than the first half, awake now to what actually matters, no longer able to pretend there is infinite time, finally ready to live rather than to wait. Jung's understanding of the unlived life points toward a set of movements that transform this grief from a source of paralysis into a source of renewal. The work is neither to suppress the grief nor to drown in it, but to let it teach you. The first movement is to actually grieve, to allow the mourning its rightful place instead of dismissing it. Many people push this grief away, judging it as self-pity or ingratitude, refusing to acknowledge the real loss it represents. But the unlived lives are real losses, and they deserve to be mourned. The paths not taken, the selves not developed, the possibilities that closed, these are genuine, and grieving them honestly is not weakness or indulgence. It is the necessary acknowledgement of the truth that to live is to lose, that every life is built on the foundation of countless other lives forgone. Only by grieving these losses fully can you release the grip they have on you. The grief that is denied festers into bitterness and regret. The grief that is honored can be moved through and eventually transformed. The second movement is to read the grief as a message, to ask what your particular mourning is pointing toward. Not all unlived lives are mourned equally. The specific possibilities that ache the most are telling you something important about your own nature, about the parts of yourself that were left unrealized and still seek expression. So the practice is to look closely at what you grieve. What is the life you mourn not having lived? What did that life contain that your actual life has lacked? Creative expression? Adventure? Intimacy? Freedom? The specific content of your grief is a message from your deeper self about what has gone unlived, and about what might, even now, still be brought into your life in some form. Jung would encourage you to take this material seriously rather than treating it as idle daydreaming. The fantasies of the other life, the recurring images of who you might have been, the envy you feel toward people living the way you once imagined living. These are not random. They are the unlived parts of yourself, making themselves known in the only language they have. When you find yourself drawn again and again to a particular kind of life, or moved unexpectedly by someone who embodies a path you didn't take, pay attention. Something in you is speaking. The grief is not merely reminding you of what is lost. It is revealing what remains alive in you, still unexpressed, still waiting. And what is still alive can, in some measure, still be lived. Which is precisely why the grief is worth listening to rather than merely enduring. The third movement is to distinguish between what is truly foreclosed and what can still be lived. Some unlived lives are genuinely gone, the possibilities that time and circumstance have permanently closed. These must simply be grieved and released. But many of the things we mourn are not, in fact, entirely beyond reach. The essence of what we long for, the creative expression, the deeper connection, the sense of adventure or freedom or meaning, can often still be lived, even if not in the exact form we once imagined. The person who dreamed of being an artist and did not become one can still bring creativity into their life. The one who longed for adventure can still seek it in forms appropriate to who and where they now are. The practice here is to separate the specific, foreclosed form from the essential longing beneath it, and to ask how that essential longing might still be honored in the life you actually have. The fourth movement is to stop living provisionally, to claim the present as the real life, the only life, the one that is actually happening. This is perhaps the most important movement of all, because it addresses the root of so much unlived life. The antidote to the provisional life is the recognition, felt all the way down, that this is it. There is no other life waiting to begin. The life you are living right now, today, in this present moment, is the real one, the only one you will ever have. And the possibilities you keep deferring will go unlived, not because they were impossible, but because you kept waiting to begin. To stop grieving future unlived lives, you have to start living now, committing to the actual life in front of you, pursuing what matters while there is still time, refusing to postpone your real existence for a future that is not guaranteed to come. The grief for the unlived life is, in the end, an urgent invitation to finally live the life you still have. The grief you feel for a life you never got to live is not a sign of ingratitude or weakness. It is one of the most human experiences there is, the recognition that you are finite, that you cannot live every life, that to become someone is to leave countless other selves unlived. Jung understood that this grief is woven into the very structure of existence, and that far from being a malfunction, it is often the beginning of the most important work of a human life, the honest reckoning with who you have been, who you have not become, and who you might still be in the time that remains. The unlived life does not have to remain only a source of sorrow. Jung saw that the grief, faced honestly, contains within it a summons, a call from the parts of yourself that were never realized, still seeking, even now, to be lived. The person you never became is not simply gone. They live on inside you as unrealized potential, and their grief is also their voice, telling you what still matters, what has gone neglected, what your deeper self still longs to express before your life is over. To listen to that voice, rather than merely mourning it, is to discover that the second half of life can hold a fullness. The first half never did, the fullness of a person who has finally stopped waiting to begin. You cannot go back and live the lives you didn't live. That grief is real, and it deserves to be honored. But you are not yet finished. The life you are living now is not provisional. It is not a rehearsal. It is not a waiting room for some realer life still to come. It is the life, the only one you have, happening right now, still open, still unfinished, still capable of holding more of who you truly are than you have yet allowed it to. The grief for the unlived life is, at its deepest, a message about the life still to be lived. And the most fitting response to it is not more waiting, not more deferral, not more provisional living, but to finally, fully, and without further postponement, begin to live the life that is still, even now, yours to claim. The lives you never lived can teach you how to live the one you have. That is the gift hidden inside the grief. And the moment you stop mourning the person you never became and start becoming, at last, the person you still can be, is the moment the unlived life stops haunting you and begins instead to guide you home.